Welcome to One Touch Professional School. I pray and I believe that we are all doing well. It is an opportunity to be gathered once again. We thank God for His faithfulness. Great. This is a continuation of our Intro to Management Accounting class. We started our discussions on process costing. In our last session, we looked at how process costing works. Okay, we looked at how a typical manufacturing concern will go about costing its product. Okay, we looked at a situation where all the units put into the process come out as finished products, and therefore there's no element of wastage, spoilage, and any other form of loss accounted for. That is, we looked at an ideal situation where maybe the machines that undertake the production process work to full efficiency level, and therefore there's no amount of wastage, spoilage, or evaporation. Great. We later introduced the concept of normal loss, that ordinarily, as the production process continues, okay, it is not possible that all units put into the process will come out as finished goods, and therefore there was a need for us to make an adjustment for normal loss. We looked at a situation where normal loss is scrapped and where normal loss is not scrapped. So the first thing was for us to look at where normal loss has no scrap value. We said that when normal loss has no scrap value, then its value is nil, and therefore that does not affect the cost per unit of the good production. That is, the good production is valued at the total cost of all the product, irrespective of the amount of normal loss. Great. Then we look at a situation where normal loss can be scrapped. That is to obtain something for the waste product. We are saying, and we did mention that where the waste or the spoilage, okay, or the normal loss could be sold for a scrap value. Now, the amount obtained from the sale of the scrap, okay, should be used to reduce the total cost of the production, so that the good units are valued at a reduced cost. Great. Then we also mentioned that, yes, at times you may be expecting that there's a normal loss in the process. However, there could be a situation where the loss we expect will be more than, the expectation. So maybe we are expecting a loss in process of 500 and it ends up to 1,000. We are saying that the extra 500 is an abnormal loss. Okay, it is a loss that was not expected under the most efficient operating condition, and therefore, when abnormal loss arise, okay, that abnormal loss does not affect our computation of the cost per unit. That is, it will be valued at the same unit price as the good production. Okay. And we also looked at where the abnormal loss can also be scrapped. Okay, now where abnormal loss can be scrapped, we are saying that that does not affect the total cost. However, the scrap value of the normal loss should be used to reduce the total loss as a result of the abnormal loss unit, so that the amount that will be sent to the profit or loss will be a reduced loss. Okay, good. Then it's also mentioned that, yes, in as much as there is an abnormal loss, there could be an abnormal gain in a situation where the loss we're expecting turns out to be lesser than the expectation. So maybe you're expecting a loss of 500 and it turns out that it becomes 300. We are saying that the difference of 200 becomes an abnormal gain. Okay, great. And gain, abnormal gain, ordinary is something that shouldn't have come up in the production process, but it has arisen. So what do we do? Now we are saying that that gain, okay, again, does not affect the valuation or cost per unit of the product. Yeah. the abnormal gain will be valued the same way abnormal loss is what valued. That is, it will be valued at the cost per unit of good what production. Okay, good. Again, if the abnormal gain can be scrapped, we are saying that the value obtained should also be used to reduce the amount of gain, so that the amount of gain sent to the profit or loss is a reduced value. Okay, good. Now, today, we are continuing our discussions on the concept of work in progress, and equivalent units. Work in progress and equivalent unit. Now, what do we mean by work in progress and equivalent unit? Now, at the end of an accounting period, there may be some units that have entered a production process, but the process has not been completed. These units that will still be in the process of production at the end of the accounting period are termed as closing work in progress, or closing work in progress units. What do we mean? Yes, the production process is a continuous, and so as materials are put into the process, it goes through several stages before the product comes out. We are saying that at the end of a particular year, it is possible that not all the units put into the process at the start of the year will come out at the end of the year. And so the unit that will still be in the process of conversion at the end of the year are termed as work in progress. Otherwise as closing work in progress. Good. Now, how do we value this closing work in progress for cost purposes? Now, the output at the end of the period will consist of the following. Okay, the closing work in progress, that is the units that are still in the process of conversion, will consist of the following. One is fully processed units. At the end of the accounting period, we'll have fully processed units, and we'll have partly processed units. That's the closing work in progress. Okay, good. Now, the closing work in progress units become the opening work in progress unit in the next accounting period. It will not be fair to allocate a full unit cost to the part processed units. And so we need to use the concept of equivalent units, which spreads out the process cost of a period fairly between the fully processed and partly processed units. Great. So we are saying that since at the end of the accounting period, not all the units put into the process would have been completed. It is essential, it is pertinent that we find a way, okay, to allocate the cost, okay, among these two units, that is the fully completed units and the closing work in progress, or the unit that are still in the process. Now, to do so, we apply the concept of equivalent units. And we are saying that the equivalent units spreads out the process cost of a period fairly between the fully processed and the partly processed units. You cannot tell me that the goods that have been fully completed, its cost will be the same as the units that are still in the process. Okay, great. So we cannot value all the units or both units at the same price, at the same cost. Therefore, we must find a way to value the fully completed units separately from the partly completed units. And the way out is the concept of equivalent units. So let's look at the principle underpinning the concept of equivalent units. Good. So to the concept of equivalent units. Now, equivalent units are notional whole units. They are what? Notional. We are assuming, we are trying to make the partly completed unit completed. So we are saying it's a notional whole unit which represents incomplete work. Which represent what? Incomplete what? Work. Great. And which are used to apportion costs between work in progress and completed output. Process costs are allocated to units of production on the basis of equivalent what? Units. Now, the idea behind this concept is that a part processed unit can be expressed as a proportion of a fully completed what? Unit. So the whole concept of equivalent units is such that since the process may have units that have been fully completed and units that are partly completed, we are saying that we can express the partly completed unit as a proportion of a fully completed unit, so that we assume that if the partly completed unit, okay, it says 70% complete. Okay, so for example, if 100 units are exactly halfway through the production process, they are effectively equal to what? 50 fully completed what? Units. I take that again. If 100 units are exactly halfway through the production process, they are effectively equal to what? 50 fully completed units. Therefore, the 100 part processed units, therefore the 100 part processed units can be regarded as being equivalent, to 50 fully completed units or 50 equivalent units. How do you get the process? Good. So the whole thing is that you have to look at the percentage completion. You have to look at by what level of completion is the work in progress. Okay, at what level of the conversion process has the partly completed unit gotten to? So we weight it, okay, and we assign some percentage to it. So if it is halfway through the process, then we are saying that it's about 50% complete. Great, great. Now, let's look at the different degrees of completion. The different degrees of completion. Now, for most processes, the material is input at the start of the process. So it is only the addition of labor and overheads that will be incomplete at the end of the period. I take it again. We are saying that in the conversion process, materials will be put into the process first. Okay, so ordinarily, materials at any point in the production process, we are saying that it would have been what? Fully used up. Okay, at the next stages to get it completed, we are saying that it is only labor and overheads cost that needs to be incurred on the material so that it could come out as what? Finished product. Okay, good. So this means that the material cost should be spread over all units, but conversion costs should be spread over the equivalent units. So it is thought of as that material, since it is put into the system first, okay, it's at any point, even if there's a closing work in progress, I say that for materials, it should have been fully used up, depending on the fact that it was put into the process at the start of the period. So materials will be assumed to have been fully completed or to have been fully what? Used up. Okay, great. And so it is the labor and overhead cost that needs to be spread over the equivalent what? Units. Great, great, great. Now, this can be achieved using an expanded statement of equivalent units. Okay, this can be achieved using an expanded statement of equivalent units, which separates out materials, labor, and overhead costs. Great, great. Note that the term conversion cost is often used to describe the addition of labor and overheads together in a process. So when we talk about conversion cost, we are looking at labor and overheads cost. Okay, labor and overheads cost. Okay, that constitutes conversion cost. Great. Now let's look at a three-stage calculation of equivalent unit. How do we calculate equivalent unit? We are saying there is a three-stage approach by which one can use in computing its equivalent unit. Good. So the first is to prepare a statement of equivalent units to calculate the equivalent unit for each type of cost. So here the type of cost, we're looking at materials and conversion cost. So we put labor and overheads together to term it as conversion cost, and we have materials. Okay, good. The next is to prepare a statement of cost per equivalent unit for each type of cost. So first, you prepare a statement of equivalent unit. The third is you prepare a statement of cost per unit, or cost per equivalent unit, is to prepare a statement of cost per equivalent unit for each type of cost. So here the costs are material costs and conversion costs. Good. The third is to prepare a statement to calculate the cost of finished outputs and closing work in progress from the statement of equivalent unit and the statement of cost per unit. So the first is to have a statement of equivalent unit prepared. The next is to determine the cost per unit of equivalent unit. And finally, you need to value the finished output and the closing work in progress from the statement of equivalent unit and the statement of cost per equivalent unit. Okay. Now let's take this example. Let's take this example and look at how this will work out. Okay. So quickly, I may have my board. So let's take the first illustration. It says that the following information relates to a production process X. Input quantities, that is the quantity of materials put into the process, was 4,000 units. Completed units is 3,500. And therefore the closing work in progress is what? 500 units. All the direct materials are added to the production at the beginning of the process. Closing inventory, okay, closing inventory of 500 units is therefore 100% complete for materials. That is the fact that materials are put into the process at the beginning of the period. We are saying that in terms of the closing work in progress of 500 units, it is 100% complete in terms of materials, but it's only 40% complete for conversion. For conversion cost, that is labor and overhead cost. The costs incurred in the period were direct material costs 24,000 Ghana cedis and conversion costs 7,400 required. Prepare process X account. Prepare process X account. Good. So here we have equivalent closing work in progress. So how do we go about it? We are saying that where there's a closing work in progress, okay, Now, the only way out to be able to prepare our process account is to apply the concept of what equivalent unit, where we try and assign some percentage completion to the work in progress, so that we'll be able to what carry out our work. Okay, great. So the process constant assumption is that where there's a closing work in progress, there is the need for us to apply the concept of conversion, or try to convert the materials that are the goods that are yet to be completed into a completed unit, a notional completed unit. And that is the way out to carry out our analysis. Now, we have looked at the 3-step calculation. The first thing is for us to look at the statement of equivalent units, is to prepare a statement of equivalent units. So how do we go about that? Good. So let's start. So first is to prepare the statement of equivalent units. Okay. So statement of equivalent units. Okay. Good. So what do we need? What do we need? We need to know the outputs. The outputs. We need the outputs. We need the total units. The total units. Okay. We need to have the percentage completion. The percentage completion. The percentage completion. Okay. Then we have our equivalent units. We have our equivalent units. And the equivalent units are in terms of what? Direct materials. Direct materials. And what? Conversion cost. Okay. Good. Good. So now, the outputs we are talking about here, okay, we have the finished what? The finished what? Goods. That's one. Then we have the closing work in what? Progress. Okay. Now the total unit completed from our illustration is what? 3,500 units, right? That is 3,500 units. And this is 100% complete from the question. That's what we were told. Is that not it? Good. Now, in terms of the closing work in progress, the total closing work in progress is what? 500 units, right? Good. Now, the closing work in progress, we are saying that in terms, the closing work in progress is therefore divided into two forms. If you are looking at the percentage completion, so in the closing work in progress, we're saying in terms of materials, because they are put into the process at the beginning of the period, in terms of materials, it is what? 100% what? Complete. Okay. Now, in terms of conversion costs, that is what? 40% what? Complete. Okay, good. So if you are looking at the equivalent units, the finished goods is still what? Since it's 100%, 100% of 3,500 is what? 3,500. It is complete. Okay. Now, the conversion cost for the finished goods, okay, it's already done. So it means that we've spent on it in terms of conversion costs. Labor and overhead costs have also been incurred on that completed unit. So in terms of conversion cost to the finished goods, it's 100% complete. So that's 3,500 as well. Good. In terms of closing work in progress of 500 units, in terms of materials, it is 100% complete. So therefore, we have 500 units here. Okay. Now, in terms of conversion cost, it is only 40% complete, meaning we have 60% more to do. So in terms of the completion of the closing work in progress, in terms of conversion cost, it is 40% complete. So 40% of 500 gives us 200. Gives us 200. Good. Good. So the equivalent units here, we have it in terms of materials and labor. Okay. So at the end of the day, the total unit is 4,000 units. In terms of direct materials, the whole 4,000 units is completed. But in terms of conversion cost, the equivalent of the 4,000 units that has been fully completed is 3,700. I hope you are together. Good. So this is the concept of equivalent units. Okay. So first is to prepare your statement of equivalent units, where you try to look at the percentage completion of the closing work in progress. The emphasis is on closing work in progress. The unit that have been completed is 100% complete. So whatever units there, in terms of material, in terms of conversion costs, it is fully completed. But the closing work in progress, we are saying that the assumption that we are putting in place is that once materials are put into the process at the beginning, now, then in terms of conversion, materials would have been fully completed, but will be yet to spend on labor and overheads to get it out of the process. So in terms of conversion costs, okay, and closing work in progress may be 100% complete in terms of materials, but for conversion costs, there will be more some extra cost to be incurred before to be fully completed. Good. Now, having prepared your statement of equivalent units, you need to look at the statement of cost per equivalent units. The statement of cost per equivalent unit. So prepare the statement of costs per equivalent units. Okay, good. So here, what do we want? We need our total costs. We need our total costs. We need our total cost in Ghana cedis. Then our direct materials. We have our conversion costs. Good. So in terms of the statement of equivalent units, we are going to value them in terms of the total cost of materials, in terms of total cost of conversion. Okay. So now let's look at so we are looking at cost per unit. So in terms of the total cost. Now, material cost is what? 24,000, and conversion cost is 7,400. So we need to divide this by the what? The equivalent what? By the equivalent units. We need to divide this by the equivalent units. And here the equivalent unit in terms of materials. Materials is 4,000 complete. So equivalent unit for materials is 4,000. Okay. So we divide this by 4,000. Then we divide this also by 3,700. Great. So what will be the cost per equivalent unit? The cost per equivalent units. So 24,000 divided by 4,000, that gives us what? 6. And 7,400 divided by 3,700, that gives us what? 2. Okay, good. So this is the cost per equivalent units. So materials cost is 6 cedis, and the conversion cost is for 2 cedis. So when looking at the total cost of an equivalent unit, the total cost of an equivalent unit is equal to 6 plus 2. That gives us what? 8 Ghana cedis. Okay, good. Good. Now, having determined the cost of equivalent units, or the cost per equivalent unit, we now need to value this equivalent units, the 4,000 and the 3,700. We need to value it. Okay, we need to value it. That is the 4,000 total units, but we know that in terms of materials, okay, we know the percentage completion, okay, or in terms of the fully completed units, okay, we know that 3,500 is fully completed, and then the equivalent unit, which is the 500, okay, we also know the percentage completion. So that is what we are going to value. Okay, good, good. So we have the statement of what? Valuation. Statement of valuation. Statement of valuation. Good. So what are we valuing? What are we valuing? So first we have the finished goods. The finished goods. Good. And we know that the finished goods, okay, we have 3,500 which is fully completed. And now that 3,500 which is fully completed, now it's the cost, the total cost of an equivalent unit is 8. So the completed unit will be valued at what? 8 Ghana cedis. So this is times 8 Ghana cedis. So 3,500 times 8 cedis. That gives us 28,000. Okay, then the closing work in progress in terms of materials, it is 500 units complete, and materials are valued at what? 6 Ghana cedis. That's the conversion cost, the equivalent cost, okay, or the cost per equivalent in terms of material is 6. Then we look at the conversion cost. In terms of conversion, materials are what? 200 complete, okay, it's 200 complete. It's 200 complete. So we have 200 units times what? 2 Ghana cedis. Okay, times 2 Ghana cedis. So let's see. 500 times 6 gives us what? 3,000. Okay. Then 200 times 2 gives me 400. So in terms of the finished goods, it's 28,000. In terms of work in progress, is 3,400. That's the cost. Okay, that is the cost. That is the cost. Good. Now, having done this, what we need to do is to do what? Prepare our process what? Accounts. Is to prepare our process accounts. Good. So let's look at how the process accounts will be prepared. So say prepare process X account. So process X account. Process X account. All right. So here in our process account, we know that we have direct materials or direct materials. The unit is what? 4,000, right? It's 4,000. Now, what's the cost of materials? The cost of materials is 24,000. And our conversion cost, we have 7,400, right? Good, good. So now, at the end of the day, here there's no losses, okay? So we have 4,400. And the total for this gives us 401. So 31,400. Good. At the end of the day, we had finished goods of 3,500. This 3,500, okay, is valued at what price? It's valued at 8 cedis, which gives us 28,000 Ghana cedis. Then you have the closing work in progress. The closing work in progress, which is 500, okay, and the total cost of that 500 is 3,400, okay, 3,400. Good, good. Because this one doesn't have a single price, that's why I can't put any price there, because we valued it at different prices, okay, in relation to materials and not conversion cost. Okay, good. So at the end of the day, our output is, so our total input is 4,000, and the total cost here is of 31,400. So this is how to go about it. Okay, good. Students usually are confronted with some few challenges here, but trust me, you need to just solve more examples and you have the principles at your fingertips. Okay, good. So the first thing is to carry out your statement of equivalent unit computation, okay, where you try to assign the various levels of completion in terms of materials and conversion costs. Okay, good. Once that is done, then you look at the cost per equivalent unit, because you would have been given the total cost incurred in terms of materials, labor, and overheads. Okay, so once you have been able to determine your equivalent unit, divide the total cost by the equivalent units to know your unit cost per materials and conversion costs. Then you go ahead and value your finished goods and your closing work in progress. Okay, so the rare emphasis here is not on the completed unit, but it's on the closing work in progress. How we are converting the closing work in progress into finished goods. That is where you have to pay attention to. And I trust when that is done, you wouldn't find anything difficult about equivalent unit when it comes to process costing. Okay, good. So just make time and go through a number of questions and you'll be fine. Good. So this first scenario is where there are no opening work in progress. You can see that at the beginning of the period, there was no work in progress. Okay, good. So that is how you go about it. Good. What of where there exists opening work in progress? How do we go about the computation? Good. So we are going to look at the twist. Okay, the twist where they exist work in progress. We're going to look at the twist where they exist work in progress. Okay, good. So where they are opening work in progress. Okay, so evaluation of opening work in progress. Now, the opening work in progress can be valued using either the FIFO method or the weighted average cost method. Good. Now, so we are going to look at the principles underpinning the FIFO method of valuation of opening work in progress, and we'll look at the weighted average method as well. Good. Now, the FIFO method of valuation deals with production on a first in, first out basis. The assumption is that the first units completed in any period are the units of opening inventory that were held at the beginning of the period. Great. Now we're held at the beginning of the period. Okay. Therefore, completed output is made up of opening work in progress that has been finished in the period and the units that have been made from the beginning to the end in the period. So the opening work in progress and the FIFO, we are saying that the first to enter the process is the first to be completed. Therefore, at the end of the year, if certain quantity of materials have come out as finished, we are saying that as part of that finished product, okay, the first one that came out was the opening inventory that were held in the process at the end of the previous production cycle, and which began the process during the current production process, right? Good. So the opening work in progress will be the first to be finished before the materials that were introduced during the current period and that were completed during the same period. So here, when you have finished goods, you are saying that the finished goods has two components, which is the opening work in progress, which was held at the beginning of the period, and materials that were introduced and completed within the period. Great. So all that we are saying here is that where there exists opening work in progress and the FIFO method is being applied, the assumption is that since the opening inventory, okay, were held at the beginning of the production cycle, that would be the first to be completed. Then the materials that were introduced during the current period and were completed during the same period of production, the same year, okay, that also forms part of the finished goods. Good. If open work in progress units were 75% complete with respect to materials and 40% complete with respect to labor, and only 25 more work, 40% complete with respect to labor, only 25% more work would need to be carried out with respect to materials, okay, because it's 75% complete. And for labor, because it's 40% complete, we will need 60% more work. Good. This means that the process costs in the period must be allocated between opening units started and completed in the period, that is fully worked units. And great. So where we are valuing opening work in progress, and we are applying the FIFO method, okay? Now, we are saying that the opening work in progress will be the units that were held in the production process at the beginning of the period. And so the assumption is that there will be the first unit to be completed before any materials introduced during the current period and that were completed during the current period. Okay, great. So the completed units will comprise of opening work in progress, unit introduced and completed during the period. Then finally, we have our closing work in progress, which will be thought of as it's the work in progress coming out of the material that were introduced during the current period and which were not completed. Okay, good. So we are saying that this means that the process costs in the period must be allocated between opening work in progress units started and completed in the period, that's fully worked units, and closing work in progress units. So here too, we have to carry out a three-stage calculation, just like we looked at under the statement of equivalency where there are no opening work in progress. Good. So the three-stage calculation with the FIFO method is similar to the calculation method previously described, with the exception that in the statement of valuation, the cost of finished output consists of the finished cost of opening work in progress, which is the sum of costs in the opening work in progress value at the start of the period, plus costs in the current period to complete these units, plus the cost of finished output started as well as finished in the period. Okay, good. So the finished cost of opening work in progress is the sum of cost in the opening work in progress value at the start of the period plus the costs, okay, in the current period to complete these units plus the cost of finished output started as well as finished in the period. Okay, good. So let's look at this illustration and look at how we go about it. Okay, good. So we have the following information relates to a production process. Okay, the following information relates to a production process X. Opening inventory is 3,000 units. Material cost in opening work in progress, that is 100% complete. Conversion cost in opening work in progress is 970. During the month, input quantities is 7,000 units. Completed output is 8,000. So there was 3,000 opening. We added 7,000. Then at the end of the day, it is 8,000 that is completed. Now this 8,000, okay, we need to look at the makeup. The closing work in progress, that's 100% complete for direct material, 60% complete for conversion cost. That is 2,000 because 3,000 plus 7,000, that will be 10,000. And if 8,000 is complete, means that there will be 2,000 closing work in progress. Good. All the direct materials are added to the production at the beginning of the process. The cost incurred in the period where direct material cost 28,000, conversion cost 17,430. Required prepare process X account. We have to prepare the process X account. Good. So what do we do? So here you can see that at the beginning of the period, we have been given the opening inventory to be 3,000, and the material cost in the opening work in progress is 12,000. And in terms of conversion cost, we say it is 30% complete, meaning that in the current period we need to do 70% work on it. Okay, good. Then during the month, we put in 7,000 units. Okay, we put in 7,000 units. Good. And the completed unit is 8,000. So here you can see this 8,000 will comprise of this 3,000, which was at the beginning. So it was 5,000, which was started and completed during the current period. Okay, good. So now let's look at how we're going to prepare our statement of equivalent units. How are we going to prepare our statement of equivalent units. Good. How are we going to prepare our statement of equivalent units? Okay. So prepare the statement of equivalent units. So we have the output, okay, we have the total units, we have the percentage, to complete. Then we have the equivalent units here. So of materials, of conversion costs. Okay, good. Good. Let me move it here, please. Good. So the outputs here, we're told that under the FIFO method, it will be made up of what? The started first in the process, okay? The units that were started, okay? So the one that was started last period, okay? The one that was started last period, and that is the opening work in progress, okay? Now the total units is 3,000. So here the opening work in progress, you have to look at it in terms of materials. So direct materials and then conversion cost, okay? Now, in terms of the percentage completion, we are told that direct materials, if you look at the opening work in progress, you say that, or opening inventory, direct materials in opening work in progress, 100% complete. So it means that percentage to complete is 0. It's because it's already completed, right? Good. In terms of conversion costs, say it's 30% complete. 30% complete means that we have 70% more to do. Okay, good. So in terms of material, its equivalent unit is 0 because it is fully done. Okay, good. However, in terms of conversion cost, say it is 70% complete. So what's 70% of 2,000? So here we are looking at the additional work left to be done. So 3,000 times 70, that is 2,100. Okay, good. Then we will come and look at the units output that were started and completed during the period, that is the current period. Okay, good. So now the completed units, the completed units during the period, the completed units. Now completed unit during the period is what? 5,000. How do I get the 5,000? Because they told us that the completed output is 8,000 units. And we know that this 8,000 units is made up of the opening inventory of 3,000. So the unit that was started and completed during the period is what? It's 5,000. Okay, good. Good. Now, in terms of the completed units, okay, now in its percentage completion is 100. This percentage completion is 100. Okay, good. So in terms of materials, it is fully completed. In terms of conversion cost, it is fully completed. Okay, good. Good. So how you apply the percentage here is different from the opening. The opening, we are looking at, okay, what work is left to be done in the current period on it. Okay, good. That's what we are looking at. But in terms of the finished or completed units, we are looking at percentage completion. Okay, in terms of opening inventory, we're looking at percentage to complete. Okay, good. Good. So that is that. Then we'll get our total what? Completed what? Units. Our total completed units. So under the FIFO method, we are saying that the first unit to be introduced will be the first to complete. Okay, and the one that was started during the period, completed during the same period. So our total completed units, okay, is 8,000. Okay, it's 8,000. In terms of materials, it is 5,000. In terms of conversion cost, is 7,100. Good, good. Okay, good. Then we'll look at the closing work in progress. The closing work in progress. Okay, the closing work in progress is what? 2,000. It's 2,000 units. Now, what is the percentage completion of the closing work in progress in terms of materials and in terms of conversion costs? Good. Now, the closing work in progress, so that it is 100% complete in terms of materials. Okay, so percentage completion is 100%. Okay, so that is 2,000. Okay, good. In terms of conversion costs, we're saying that it is 60% complete. It's 60% complete. So what's 60% of 2,000? That is 1,200. That is 1,200. So here we get our total units here to be 10,000. In terms of materials, is 7,000 complete. In terms of conversion cost is 8,300. Great, great. So having gotten our equivalent unit, we then go ahead to determine our cost per equivalent unit. Our cost per equivalent unit. So we have statement of cost per equivalent unit. Okay, so what are we evaluating? Direct material, materials, and conversion cost. Okay, so we look at the total cost. So the total cost, they're saying that materials is what? 28,000. Okay, 28,000. And then conversion cost is 17,430. Okay, then the equivalent units are 7,000 for materials, and then 8,300 for. So let's look at the unit cost. 28 divided by 7 is 4,000. So sorry, 4 cedi. And that of 17,430 divided by 8,300. That is 2 cedi, 10 pesos. Okay, good. So the total cost of a completed unit, the total cost of completed units is equal to 4 plus 2.1. So that gives us what? 6.1. Okay, good. So how do you go? Okay, so let's look at how to value the finished goods and the work in progress, closing work in progress. So we have our statement, our statement of valuation. Good. So here we are valuing. We said that the completed unit comprised of the opening work in progress, which was started or that were held in the period, and therefore will be the first to be completed before the materials introduced during the current period and completed during the current period. Okay, good. So here let's look at valuation of the opening work in progress. Okay, good. So here on the opening work in progress, you can see that we're told that opening work in progress unit is 3,000, and material cost in opening work in progress 100% complete is 12,600, right? And then the conversion cost in the opening work in progress is what? 970. So we have what is called cost to date. That is the cost incurred on the opening work in progress before this current period was 12,600 plus 970. That gives me 13,570, right? Then we look at the conversion cost, because in terms of material, we were told that it was 100% complete. Okay, so conversion cost to complete, that is the cost that was spent on the opening work in progress during the current period. So if you look at our statement of equivalent unit, okay, now the opening work in progress, we had 70% work to be done, and that gives us 2,100 units. Now, that 2,100 units, at what price should we value it? Now, the conversion cost for a completed unit or an equivalent unit should be valued at 2 cedi, 10 pesos. So we value the 2,100, which is the opening work in progress. That is, we had 70% more work to be done, and 70% more work to be done. Its equivalent unit was 2,100. Good. So we pick the 2,100 and value it at the cost per conversion cost. Okay, the cost per equivalent unit in terms of conversion cost, it is 2 cedi, 10 pesos. So we have 2,100 units times 2 cedis of 2,100 units times 2 cedi, 10 pesos. So 2,100 times 2 cedi 10 pesos, that gives us 4,410. 4,410. And 4,410 plus 13,570. That gives us 17,980. 17,980. Good. So if you have 17,980, then what is the cost of the completed unit? That is the one which was started. So this is for the open work in progress. Then we talk about the started and completed during the period. So that the one that was started and completed during the period was 5,000 units. And what's the total cost of a unit? The total cost of a unit, of a fully completed unit, is 6 cedi 10 pesos. So multiply this one by 6 cedis 10 pesos. So 5,000 times 6 cedis 10 pesos. It gives me 30,500. 30,500. Okay, good. So when we add these two, then we get the total cost of completed units, 17,980 plus 30,500. So we have 48,480. Okay, good. 48,480. Then we look at the closing work in progress. Good. The closing work in progress in terms of materials. In terms of materials, what is the percentage completion in terms of our statement of equivalent units? Good. So this is a statement of material is 2,000. Conversion is 2,200. So we have 2,000 units because material is 100% complete times the conversion cost. This is 4 cedis. Conversion cost 2,000 is 1,200 units times 2.1. Great. So 2,000 times 4, that gives us 8,000. And 1,200 times 2.1 gives us 2,520. So the total closing stock will be valued at 10,520. Okay, good. Good. I trust you are following. So now let's look at our process account. Let's look at our process account. So we have our process X account. Our units of costs or totals, let me say amounts. Good. So we have our opening work in progress. The unit was 3,000. The cost to date, which is 12,600 plus 970, which gives us 13,570. Okay, good. Then we have materials introduced during the period. The materials that were introduced during the period. 7,000 units were introduced at a cost of 28,000. Then we have conversion cost of 17,430. Good. At the end of the day, our finished goods was 8,000. And this 8,000, we have already valued it. So we come here and pick the value, which is 48,480. And our closing work in progress to be 2,000, also valued at 10,520. Okay, good. So once you do your statement of equivalent unit and the others, the work is done. You just have to come and put it in the T form. And there you go. Okay, so this is 10,000. This is 10,000. 13,570 plus 28,000 plus 17,430. That gives us 59. That gives us 59,000. So 48,480 plus 10,520. That is also 59. Good. Good. So this is how we go about the process account. Okay, where there's opening inventory or opening work in progress. Good. So the assumption is that if you're using the FIFO method of valuation, then the first to enter the process is the first to be completed. So the emphasis is on the opening work in progress. Okay, and the method of valuation adopted. So here it is FIFO. So the assumption is that the inventory that were held in the process at the beginning of that production process will be the first to be completed. And then any unit introduced during the current period, and that was completed during the same current period. Okay, good. So the total finished goods comprised of two: the opening work in progress that were held and units that were introduced and were completed during the same current period. Okay, then the closing work. So obviously the closing work in progress will come out of the materials that were introduced during the period but were not what completed. I hope you are together. Good, good. So that's the principle. That's the principle. Okay, good. Now let's also look at the weighted average method. The weighted average method of valuing opening work in progress. Good. Now this method values inventory by calculating a weighted average cost of units produced from both opening inventory and units introduced in the current period. This method makes no distinction between units of opening inventory and new units introduced to the process during the accounting period. The cost of opening inventory is added to the cost incurred during the period, and completed units of opening inventory are each given a value of one fully equivalent unit of what? Production. I take it again. We are saying that under the weighted average method, it makes no distinction. It makes no distinction between units of opening inventory and new units introduced to the process during the accounting period. Under this method, cost of opening inventory is added to cost incurred during the period. Okay, and completed units of opening inventory are each given a value of one full equivalent unit of production. Good. So let's look at the three-stage calculation. Now, the costs are worked out in a similar way to the previous example, where there was opening work in progress. The statement of equivalent units. Prepare a statement of equivalent unit for the finished output and for closing work in progress. So the finished output here is 1. Okay, good. We will not make any distinction between opening and started and completed during the period. It's finished goods. The statement of cost per equivalent units, that calculate the cost per equivalent unit for direct material and the cost per unit for conversion cost. However, remember to include the cost of the opening work in progress. The material cost of the opening work in progress should be included in the total direct material cost, and the conversion cost of the opening work in progress should be added to the conversion cost for the current period. Great. The statement of valuation. Having calculated equivalent units and the cost per equivalent unit, prepare a statement of what? Valuation. Good. So now let's look at how that method also what works. Okay. Let's look at how the other method works. Okay. Good. Good. So let's take an example. Okay, so we have this illustration that's based on the same example that we looked at. So we're looking at it in terms of weighted average method of valuation. Good. So let's start. How is this statement of equivalent unit prepared? So we have our statement of equivalent units. Okay, So here we have the outputs. Okay, we have the total units as usual. We have our percentage complete. Okay, then we have our equivalent units. Equivalent units, which is direct materials and conversion costs. Okay, these are units. Okay, good. So the output here, we have the finished goods. So here, as we said, there's no distinction between opening and started and completed during the period. From this question, you can see that our completed unit is what? 8,000. So that's it. Okay, good. Percentage completion is 100% in terms of both materials and conversion cost. Okay, good. Then we have the closing work in progress. Is that not it? Good. The closing work in progress, the total unit is 2,000. Then in terms of materials, what's the percentage completion for materials? We said that closing output, closing work in progress is 100%. So that's 100%. Okay, if it's 100% complete, then it means that it is done, right? It's 2,000. Good. Then for conversion cost, we said it is 60% complete. It's 60% of complete. Now, what is 60 of 2,000? 2,000 times 60%, that is 1,200. That is 1,200. Okay, good. So at the end of the day, our total units is 10,000. In terms of equivalent units, materials is 10,000 complete. Conversion cost is 9,200 complete. Good. So now let's value them. So we have the statement of cost per unit. Okay, good. So we have direct material cost. Conversion cost. Okay. So let's look at our total cost. Total cost. Let's look at our total cost. Good. Now here, the total cost, we are looking at costs in opening work in progress. Now for opening work in progress, material cost is what? 12,600. And conversion cost is what? 970. Okay. Then costs in the period. Costs in the period, of course, that were incurred in the period. Material cost is 28,000 and conversion cost is 17,430. Okay, good. So let's add. $12,600 plus 28,000, that is 4,600. And 970 plus 17,430, that gives me 18,400. Good. So what is the completed unit here? What are the completed units? Now, in terms of material, it's 10,000. In terms of conversion cost, is 9,200, right? So let's look at cost per equivalent units. Cost per equivalent units. So that one, here we have 4,600 divided by 10. So let me put the division sign here. So that gives me 4 cedis. Good. So our cost per equivalent unit, we have for direct material cost, we have 40,600 divided by 10,000. That gives us 4 cedi and 6 pesos. For our conversion cost, we have 18,410. So 18,400 divided by 9,200, that gives us 2 cedi. Okay, good. So the cost, the total cost for a completed unit, the total cost for a completed unit is equals to 4.06 plus 2, which gives us a total of 6 cedis and 6.06 pesos. Okay, 6 cedis and 6 pesos. Okay, good. So let's look at the valuation. The valuation of statement of valuation. Statement of valuation. Good. So here our valuation cost, we have got the cost of finished goods. Costs of what? Finished goods. Now the finished goods is 8,000 times 6 cedi and 6 cedis. 8,000 times 6 cedis, 06 pesos. That is 48. 480. Then I'll talk about the closing in progress, which is 2,000 at that's 2 cedis. So in terms of materials, it's 2,000 times 4.04. Sorry, 4.06. 0.06. In terms of conversion cost, so 2,000 times 4.06, that gives me 8,120, and 1,200 times 2 gives me 2,400. So this is done. So work in progress, 2,400 plus 8,120, that gives me 10,520. Okay, good. So that is the valuation. So let's look at our process account. Let's look at our process account. So process X account. Good. So now to the process account. So you have the opening work in progress. The opening work in progress Okay, that gives us what? 3,000 units at a cost of 13,570. That is 12,600 plus 970. Okay, then we have material costs, and there was a material introduction of 7,000 at a cost of 28, and we have our conversion cost of 17,430. Okay, good. Now our finished goods is 8,000, valued at 48,480. Then we have our closing work in progress of 2,000, valued at 10,520. So at the end of the day, we have our 10,000 at 59,000. About 10,000 at 59,000. Good, good. So this is how to apply the weighted average method as well. So now what you need to do is to try your hands on more questions using the FIFO method and weighted average, where there are opening inventories or opening work in progress. Okay, good. So the others is the same: how to apply your normal loss, how to apply your abnormal loss, how to apply your abnormal gain. It's the same principle as you have learned in our previous section. So the most important thing is how to get your equivalent units. So I implore you to make time and go through a series of questions, okay? And I'm sure you'll be able to go through, or you can fully understand the principles. So don't hesitate. Again, if you are practicing any question and you are challenged, feel free and get in touch. Let's discuss the issues, and I'm sure you'll be fine. Okay, good, good. So on this note, we end here and continue our discussions later. Do enjoy the rest of the day.